Describe a moment that you came closest to dying.
Yeah, I don't know if that was it. Actually, I would say maybe I'm an epileptic, and from time to time I pass out and start flopping around on the ground. And I,
How does that work if you're doing live shows? You have to go through specific things of what can't be done?
every epileptic has different seizure triggers, and I don't have a flashing lights trigger.
Okay.
So that's never been an issue for me. I've also never had a seizure while I've been medicated on anticonvulsants. So yeah, I'm trying to remember the seizure that probably was the most dangerous. I had one on the blacktop one time when I was a kid. I had one at the gym one time where there's a lot of metal things I could have hit my head on. That maybe was it. So yeah, one of those seizures, probably the one I had in 2014 while I was on the elliptical machine, might have been the most dangerous one.
Yeah, because you're just dropping into something already moving.
Yeah, and it, like moving metal pieces. I had an aunt pass away or great aunt. It runs in my family, and she hit her head on a bathtub. She was a freshman at Sarah Lawrence, did not survive the event. So that's the most dangerous thing to look out for when you're having a seizure, not hit your head on something.
So, I mean, as long as you remember, have you always known, or was there like kind of a distinct moment where you had this seizure and you learned about it that way?
I had the first one in 7th grade when I was running the presidential fitness mile in gym class.
Oh no.
And I was in my San Francisco Unified School District uniform, and I woke up in the hospital. And I it's really interesting because I think about this tendency in me that was also the reason that I felt like I could do the rap marathon, which is I generally want to push things beyond where I should, and have a sort of switch in my brain where I have an override button where I'm like, yeah, my body's telling me to stop this right now, but I don't really want to stop. So I'm just going to kind of plow through. And I think that's one of the reasons I have seizures. I had it on the elliptical machine. I had it running the mile in gym. And I was worried about having a seizure at the end of this rap marathon because I was sort of taxing my body so much. And that's when seizures happen for me, is when I sort of push past the moment where my body is screaming at me to stop doing something.
You made me feel less shitty about being the kid that walked it.
I really wanted it. I wanted that president, and this is maybe a character flaw or something. I am highly competitive, and I wanted that gold foil certificate from George Bush.
It's very few people actually got it, because I think a lot of people, especially early on, it was like the pull-ups that would fuck people up, I think.
Yeah, there's the pull-ups, there's the flexibility challenge. I am also not fast, and I was trying to be fast. And I've done athletics. I've always been the kid who had the most grit. I'd get the sportsmanship award, I'd get the grit award, but I was not good at sports. So I think I was trying to go against, God or whoever you believe in, the spaghetti monster's will, by trying to force this issue.
But then you learned. Well, actually, wait, so were you quickly put on medication after that, or?
No, I had a second. So they didn't put me on meds right away. I had another seizure 2 weeks later at a bowling alley. We have a Japantown in San Francisco, and I was there with some friends, and I had a seizure, and they thought I was faking, so they started kicking me. And this is 7th grade still. Then after that second seizure, I had to go on a medication called Depakote, which made my cheeks swell up like a chipmunk. It was not what I wanted in 7th grade.
That's the thing, is for people that never haven't gotten on any sort of medication yet, the the side effects are such a massive part of every fucking medication.
Anticonvulsants are no joke meds. They also double as antipsychotics. They prescribe them to people with bipolar issues, because they're basically if people know what an audio compressor does, it takes the audio wave and it squashes the peaks and it squashes the valleys, and that's what an anticonvulsant or a mood stabilizer does to your brain waves. It takes the peaks and it takes the valleys and it goes, and there's a lot of, I felt like a zombie when I was on some of those drugs, and I've been on a lot of different ones.
And does it just take like years and years and years of like testing things on and off until you're like, okay, this is the closest to what I would consider normal?
I have my personal opinions about anticonvulsants, which my opinion is that for me, the oldest one, this drug called phenytoin, which is now the generic of that drug, is actually the best one. It has the least messed up side effects. Now, there are probably people in your audience who might take different, more recent designer drugs that work better for them, but I have a feeling that a lot of these drugs that come along, they haven't been in the market as long. They're not generic yet. So the pharma companies push them because they can charge way, way, way more money for the drugs that haven't gone generic yet, but they're actually not as good as the old warhorse drug that they made in the 50s. And some of these new ones, have really messed me up and freaked me out, made me feel like a hollow person. So I'm on a low dosage of that drug phenytoin now, with the ambition to someday wean myself off it. But it's for an epileptic, that's a complicated choice to make, because if you get behind the wheel of a car, you're putting people at risk besides yourself, and you never know when you might have one of these.
Well, because so I mean, with that, I don't know if we're getting too personal. Is that something that like a doctor has said, yes, this is a thing that you could do?
It's tough because there's liability issues for the doctors to recommend that. And so their advice is almost always conservative. I have a neurologist who thinks that the dosage I'm on of phenytoin that I've been on at this level, which is 200 milligrams a day, is a sub therapeutic level, which is too low in her advice. But it's a level at which I feel like I don't feel the warning signs of seizures popping up, and I also feel like myself. So it's a very tough personal choice to decide what to do, how to do, and you could be off meds for 30 years and then have a seizure, and if you have it at the wrong time, I don't know. I have a historical anecdote that I find interesting, but I don't know if we're veering too off topic here.
No, I love it. There's no topic. Okay. You're the topic.
So there's a guy named Harry Laughlin who in the 30s, 40s, he was in charge of this thing called the Eugenics Records Office in the United States. This was before World War II and before the United States had decided that maybe eugenics aren't such a good thing. And he was really into sort of, like Nazi-esque perfect race kind of shit. And the thing is, he lumped epileptics into that category. And there was involuntary sterilization of thousands of people in the United States in those decades, people that were in like undesirable categories, which could include felons, gay people, people with epilepsy, other genetic disorders. And Harry Laughlin, this guy who ran the office out of Long Island, New York, was an epileptic. He was a secret epileptic. He was a self-hating epileptic. And he got like an honorary degree from the University of Heidelberg by the Nazis and stuff for like his contributions to race science and stuff. And you know what? This guy died. This is not confirmed, but it's the belief, because he would have seizures in front of his staff and hide it. He died behind the wheel of a car. He drove it off a cliff, and nobody knows why. And it's assumed that he had a seizure.
Wow.
And it's just crazy to me, the self-hatred and the ways that it's sort of played in history. And my aunt, in those decades that Harry Laughlin was a dude, this woman, Polly, had her seizure. She was a freshman at Sarah Lawrence studying chemistry. And I believe that this is kind of confirmed by family details, that she wasn't well medicated because it wasn't considered socially acceptable at that point in history to be an epileptic. And she was studying chemistry of all things. I just find it fascinating. I didn't really have a main point, but I find this dude, Harry Laughlin, such an interesting archetype of this guy who spends his life and kind of like, evangelical pastors who turn out to be gay and
Sure.
hate themselves for being gay, it's just so unfortunate that we, haven't reached a point where you could just be yourself. It's okay. Love yourself.
It is. Yeah. That I feel it. it's one of those weird things, especially with kind of the last thing you talked about of, it's like sometimes you see it and you'll think it, but then it's like, you're like, can I say it? Because then people are going to potentially take it as me saying that it is a negative, but that's not the point that you're making. It's just that someone hates themselves so much because they have such a negative connotation, or they have so much to gain. Because a lot of especially out of that latter group, there's a lot to gain from pushing shit that you are, or pushing stuff against of what you are.